So views seem to act like a simplified query that looks like a table. Now views need to follow a few rules, therefore not every query can be turned into a view. Let me give you an example. Here's a very simple query where we're looking at all of the records of the grant table. Now let's go ahead and do an aggregation query by taking the employee ID and finding out the total sum amount each employee gets. So let's group that by the emp ID. Let's run this query. Alright, so these are the totals. We get fewer records because we're only getting one record per employee, and then their total's sitting there too. Well, this is a great report. Let's turn it into a review by saying create view dbo vemp grant totals as, and then run it. And look what it says here in the error message. It says, I failed to create this because no column name was specified for column 2. What do you mean by that? Let me run the query inside the view. Aha, this expression field has no field name. Now, just like you can't create a tables field without a name, you also can't have a views field without its name. So all we need to do is fix this is go right here and say as, and we'll alias it as total amount. Now we can run this create view statement, and now we can go ahead and look at the results from the view. Select star from vemp grant totals. Again, here's the results of our vemp grant totals view, and it shows each employee ID and the total amount of grants they found. Pretty simple view, and let's say that you were interested in making sure people could use this view, but you did not want them to see or recreate the code that made the view, and they know a simple SP help text could see it. For example, let's do this. Let's say SP_help text and then the name of the view. Let's run that. And they know exactly what went into creating this. Okay, well, let's copy this code and get ready to paste it in again into a new window. Because I'm going to drop the view db vemp grant totals. Run that. And then we're going to create it with the new code. Now I'm going to open a new query window and recreate this view. But I'm going to put an option in there so nobody can see how I created it. I'm going to put with encryption, encryption, and run this. Commands completed successfully. Now let's go test it. Does this view still work exactly the same as before? Yes. Now when we try to see the code inside of the view, what happens? It says, sorry, that view's encrypted. You can use it, but you can't analyze its individual lines of code. So the with encryption option allows the view to run exactly the same as it would as though you didn't have the with encryption option on it. The only difference is other people cannot see the code that went into the creation of this object. Let's take the view vEmployeeGrants, and we're choosing this for a reason. This is a view that comes from multiple data sources, in this case 2 or more tables. Now, how do we find out which tables this view depends on to get its data? Well, we know the old mainstay of SP help text, and then in quotes the name of the view we want to analyze. Okay, let's check that out. Let's copy this, paste it in a new window, and it looks like it depends on the employee table and the grant table. But there's another handy code way of finding out that doesn't require you to cut and paste. Go select all fields from sys.views. And what has this got? The list of all the views. Well, I can't tell from this view exactly what objects these views depend on to get their data. But what we can do is we can say inner join on sys.SQL_dependencies. What do these things depend on? And we will do that on the SV object ID is equal to the SD object ID. And let's run it. And here's our list of views. Now, which one do we want? We want where sv.name is equal to the employee grants view. The VEmployee grants view is listed many times, and what we're looking for is the major object ID. And it looks like it depends on this object number right here, and it also depends on this major object ID here. Okay, so how do we find out what those two objects are? Well, all we have to do is go select all fields from sys.objects, where the object underscore ID is equal to, let's try the first number. Okay, that's the employee table. That's the first base table. Now what about this next ID? That's the grant table. So the VEmployee grants view, which runs fine right now, depends on the employee table, and it depends on the grant table. So what would this code do to my view? Drop table, grant. Let me run that. Commands completed successfully. Now I didn't delete the view, but I deleted one of its base tables. Let's run this. It says invalid object name grant. Could not use view or function VEmployee grants because of binding errors. When you delete a dependency, you break the object that depends on it. Well, I sure missed having my grant table, so I went and ran the reset script from the last lab just to put everything back. And I'm going to switch back to the JProCode database, and yay, my grant table is back. Okay, we know deleting the grant table will mess up the VEmployee grants view. Is that the only thing that winds up going sideways if the grant table is gone? I mean, who would this statement hurt besides the viewers of that first grant? Well, what we can do is we can find out by going sp_depends and the name of the object that you were considering deleting. In this case, we want to find out every object that depends on the grant table. Wow. All of these objects would be messed up and would no longer work if we got rid of the grant table. Our next goal is sitting right here in the comments. Make sure VEmployee grants never loses a dependency. Well, we're going to have to create or alter the view in order to get that done. To do that, we're going to need to look at the source code. Let's go sp_help text and 2 single quotes, and inside of here, the name of the view we want to protect. Let's run that, and there's the code that created it. Let's copy this into a new query window. Okay, now we can't create this because it's already been created, so we're going to change the first word from create to alter. Now, right before the as, we're going to put with schema binding, schemabinding. It's all one word. Now we're going to run this. Now, notice what it says here. Schema binding, which will prevent dependencies from being deleted, they need to be referenced in a 2-part name. All right, well, the employee table is named dbo.employee, and the grant table is dbo.grant. So for schema binding, you must use 2-part names for all your tables. There we go. Commands completed successfully. Now watch what happens when I try to drop the table grant. Normally I could do this, except it says you cannot drop the grant table because it is being referenced by the object VEmployee grants. When you use the with schema binding option, it prevents any of the dependencies of that view from being deleted until that view or object is no longer using it. To prevent a view's dependencies from being deleted right out from underneath it, we use the with schema binding. To prevent somebody from viewing our code, we can use with encryption. Now, do you have to choose between the two, or can you use both of these? Well, let's try this. It says incorrect syntax near the word with. Well, what if I want to prevent the dependencies from being deleted and I don't want anybody to see my code? Well, on this with, you can specify more than one option by separating each option with a comma. Let's run this. Now, that prevents us from dropping the tables that it depends on. It also prevents anybody from viewing the code that created the view. Lab 4.3, Skill Check 1. Create an aggregate view called VCustomerQuantity based on the vSales view that shows each customer ID and the total quantity they have ordered. The expression field should be called Total QTY. Skill Check 2. Take the VCustomerQuantity view and encrypt it so that nobody can read the code used to create the view. Skill Check 3. Find out how many objects depend on the DBO employee table. Note, if you don't run the current setup script, SQL Programming Chapter 4.3 Setup.SQL, you may see an 8th record in your result set. Skill Check 4. Ensure that all dependencies of the vSales view cannot be deleted.